Video games. What even are they? I mean, you don't look at them. You don't play them. Why are they called Oh, wait. So video games. I've been working on them professionally for since 1996. It's been a while. And I've learned a lot of things about them, but they're not things that I can really talk about a lot of the specifics on this channel because most of the work that I would like to show you is under NDA, non-disclosure agreement. I'm using proprietary tools. I'm working at a big company. I can't show the process. But hey, lucky for you guys, I got laid off early this year. Woo! One of the knock-on effects of that is that I get to make my own thing. So for the period of time where I was laid off, I was spending a lot of time looking for jobs, which meant building up my portfolio. See, the last 15 plus years, I was at ArenaNet making third-person open-world games, and what most of the industry, at least in my area of the woods, the Seattle area, most of them are looking for first-person shooter type level designers, and so I've been having to demonstrate that yes, I can do this other kind of level design as well. So, wait, and you might be thinking, Josh, level design? What are you talking about? Look behind you, Josh. And I'll be like, what? You'll be like, look, art. You're an artist, right? Sure, I love art. I've done a lot of art in my game career, but my focus, my passion really is for level design. And the reason for that is because it's a more holistic view of the player's experience. You have more control over what kind of emotions you want to evoke and the kind of ebb and flow of the experience, because you're spatially arranging the assets from art, the core mechanics and systems that have been designed, and you're putting them together into this 3D environment, usually 3D environment, sometimes 2D. I've done some of that too. That's pretty fun as well. But the point is, that's been kind of my professional focus, and it's kind of a complicated topic. So I haven't really been able to talk about it because so much of it is tied up in my day job. So here we are. I've got some footage of me working on this stuff while I've been doing design tests for various companies. I ask them first, I say, hey, I'm doing this design test for you. Can I use this for my portfolio? So the ones that said yes to that, I've got footage of me making it, and I will be talking about my design process and what it's like to design a video game level. So I'm gonna sit down and talk about that right now. No, not now, in 1 minute. Hey, remember last time we had this little competition where I was giving away a sculpture and a book and all this cool stuff? The winners were selected, and stick around to the end, or just skip to the end if you don't care about this level design stuff, and you can see who won. So let's talk level design, shall we? All right. So over the course of my career, I've worked on so many kinds of content, so many kinds of levels, levels that accommodate the player versus the environment, players versus players, teams versus teams, team versus environment, environment versus environment. No, wait. I don't think I've done... Is that a thing? Someone write that down. That's a good idea. Someone should make a game about that. The point being, I've worked on a huge variety of game types throughout my career. And so there are other designers who have worked on one specific genre their whole career. So they're on this end of that kind of spectrum. And, I'm more over here. And so each of these sides has pros and cons. Someone who's done one thing for a long time learns a lot about it. They get very deep into it. Someone like me who's over here has a lot of different influences that are coming together to create their design sensibilities. And so it's not that one is good and one is bad, it's just different teams may require, different balances of that on their team. And there's another spectrum that I want to bring up, and it's this one here. So there are some people, now this isn't actually very common, but you see it from time to time. There are people who think they are a true auteur, they are some kind of lone genius who, the ideas spring fully formed from their head, and then it's up to the rest of the team to simply implement that. That's not how game design works. And when it does, it's usually pretty bad. So I'm on this side over here. I like to synthesize the ideas of the team from pulling from a lot of different influences, a lot of different. So now keep in mind, a lot of influences in video games come from other video games and often movies and TV as well. I think a really well-rounded designer is also going to pull from literature, philosophy, psychology, architecture, industrial design, all these things. So that's another part of this thing, is like being well-rounded, super important to design. So when synthesizing all these different influences, what's required is great communication. Really, I can't ever emphasize this too much. Great design is predicated on great communication. You have to be able to articulate what you're trying to achieve, how you're trying to achieve it, what your influences are, why you're doing those things, etc., etc. So this is across all fields, right? So this is the reason that a great director of photography can do a science fiction movie and then go to a horror movie and then do an action movie. Because 90% of what a director of photography does, the language of film, is the same across all genres. Now, every genre does have its unique quirks that you really need to understand to do a piece in that genre well, but that's where great communication, that can overcome any boundary, right? You're talking to the set designer and the director and the costume. All these people are coming together to create a coherent vision. And someone like a director of photography, in my example here, can synthesize all of those opinions and really understand what they're trying to achieve and how they're going to achieve it. So level design is just like that. You're trying to figure out what the whole team wants and coalescing around that goal. So here's my process for general level design. Applies to any kind of game that has levels. Number 1, determine what drives the core engagement loop for the player. Now, that's kind of a wonky, lingo-y way to say, essentially, why are players playing the game? What is it about the game that attracts them to it? And this is different in different genres and different games within genres. So for instance, a lot of games, it's just a power fantasy. I want to be this big hulking brute who could take down anything with my muscles and guns. For another, it's like, I want to be really smart and solve puzzles and feel good about how clever I am. For other ones, it's how am I engaging with other players? There's a whole social dynamic going on. And so level design can facilitate that core loop that engages the players, or it can obstruct it. So you have to be really cognizant of what you're trying to accomplish and make sure that the spatial layout fits what the players are there to do. And discovering the specifics of how exactly a level layout accomplishes that's the joy of level design. It's never a direct line. It's never obvious. Usually never obvious. 2, things always change in game development. So mechanics and systems are driving the flow of the game, right? And the level design is, doing its best. I, as a level designer, am doing my best to facilitate it, not obstruct it. But mechanics and systems are constantly changing. Sometimes you'll discover a mechanic that was kind of a peripheral thing that players did every once in a while and realize, oh, this is actually really fun. This should be the core mechanic. This should be the main thing that the player does most of the time. And then suddenly the levels need to be completely different. Say it's climbing ladders or something like that, but your levels are mostly flat. Suddenly you're going to want very vertical levels because climbing ladders turns out to be super fun. I've never seen a game like that, but I could imagine one could exist. But anyway, that is why being open to change is super important for a level designer. 3, I'll usually start with a top-down map, just a quick whiteboard sketch or something, scribbled on Notepad. And depending on how vertical the level is, you'll either jump right into building a prototype of that level, or if it's fairly flat, you could kind of do a lot of iteration just with pencil and paper or in Photoshop or something like that. It really just depends on the needs of the game. So, but the important thing to take away is 4, do not stop at one map. Never stop at your first design of anything, whether it's art, sculpture, drawing, architecture, whatever it is, don't accept your first design. That's rule number 1 that, well, here it's rule number 4. Wait, these aren't rules, these are just steps. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I spend a lot of time iterating. I spend most of my time iterating. So I will take a design idea that seems amazing, I'll get it in the game, and it's not amazing. And I won't know why. And then I'll try something else, I'll do a tweak, and it gets further away or closer to it. And so you're just constantly doing this iteration loop, trying to figure out, find the fun is what you're doing. And how the level is laid out makes a huge difference to that process. So a lot of times I'll do a bunch of very quick sketches, and sometimes I'll combine bits and pieces of different maps into one to find the best, you know, the optimal combination of elements that make a thing really fun. So that's just a really important thing to keep in mind, is that no one sits down and just makes a map and it's done. There's your level. It's always changing. It's always iterated upon, etc. 5. So when you are making a map, generally what you're starting with is a gray box, depending on the studio you're working at. Sometimes, some studios, like at ArenaNet, a lot of times we would have the final assets and we would just be plunking them on a map. And this can work for open world game design, but when you're getting into more constrained environments where the design needs to be really tight, that doesn't work so well. And that's where gray boxing comes in. And gray boxing is essentially where you're laying out your map with gray boxes, more or less. Imagine making a giant cardboard fort. And the idea here is that you're removing all of the unnecessary visual information and focusing only on the gameplay part of it. However, this can lead into a trap. If you're only doing gray box exploration, finding the fun with that without integrating any of the art, you can often run into problems. Here's just a dumb example. It rarely happens, but it could happen. Say I'm gray boxing the inside of a castle and I've made all of the pillars square pillars. And then the artist decides they're going to make round pillars. And so when the level is completed, suddenly all the sight lines that I had, or all my ideas for ducking behind pillars, are totally different, because now you can see around the pillars way easier. So that sort of thing, you need to integrate your art, figure out that pipeline is what it's called, as at least get that blocked in much faster, much sooner than you might think. So integrating the art pipeline ASAP, important. Even if it's only the shapes, not the textures or colors or lights and that kind of stuff. Okay, and finally, be really good friends with analytics and QA. So quality assurance are the people who are testing your map, making sure that it plays the way you're intending, making sure there's not ways to exploit it or get out the side of the map, that sort of thing. Analytics is kind of a newer thing in game development over the past 10 or 15 years. I say newer. It's not new anymore, it's been around forever. Anyway, that's things like heat maps and data about, you know, how many power-ups the players got, where they died the most often, you know, that kind of stuff. But seeing that data laid out can be super helpful. You can find areas on your map that you didn't intend to be very dangerous. Oh, look at this. All these players are dying right there. Or there seems to be a lot of people stuck in this one area. Or players are 100% of the time going for this weapon instead of that weapon. Why is it? That could be a weapon balance problem. It could be a level layout problem. So anyway, using that data is really important. And I'm going to put a 0.7 just tacked on to 0.6 here, which is, besides being friends with them, all the rest of the departments, the sooner you could get them involved. So audio, for example, the sooner you can get kind of a general ambience, you know, whether it's music or sound effects or, you know, just birds tweeting, anything, that kind of stuff, like getting them involved early in the process can really help build a really great, coherent type of environment. Okay, and finally, this is not on that list. This is something that goes between every one of those parts of the process. Check in with everybody all the time. Again, communication is super vital. Now, obviously, you can go overboard. You don't want to have a meeting every single day about what you think the game is and the pillars and all this kind of stuff. But Just checking in general on a regular cadence with people is super important. You're reestablishing why everyone is excited about this game, the particular mechanics. Maybe they're changing and you didn't realize it. Maybe the story has evolved and you didn't realize this area you're making just doesn't fit the tone anymore. You've got to be checking in constantly with all the departments. That is the soft skill that absolutely makes or breaks a game. It separates the really stellar games from the average games. It's, if a game is firing on all cylinders, all the departments are working together, everything feels super coherent and tight, it's because great communication was happening. All right, so that is all stuff that's just general level design. Now I want to talk a little more specifically about the kind of levels I'm going to be showing you coming up here in a minute. So the idea of the first-person shooter game, it tends to be a different genre, it has different conventions, and there are different needs that an environment needs for those kind of games. And specifically competitive ones, team versus team, player versus player. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but to kind of establish kind of where my thinking comes from on that, we need to talk about player psychology a little bit. So here's my thinking. This is kind of my own theory I've concocted over the years. Tell me if this makes sense to you. In a competitive match in a virtual environment, there are essentially two factors that go into success or failure. The first is the kind of twitch skills, the hand-eye coordination, being able to pull off a 360 no-scope headshot, and that sort of thing. And then there's the tactics or the strategy layer. And what I mean by strategy is kind of tactics and strategy mushed together. So those are things like who's calling out the orders, what do you do with the econ, the money that you get between rounds, who should go left, who should go right, when should we rotate, all those things. That's kind of the strategic thing. To pull those things off well, that's where it gets into the hand-eye coordination territory. So it comes down to coordination plus strategy. And in searching for a unifying theory for what ties these elements together, I came up with this theory. Feel free to poke holes in it, but this is my idea. It all comes down to noise reduction. Now you might be thinking, what does noise have to do with level design and gameplay? So by noise, I'm referring to inaccessible data or data that's hard to parse. You can't quite figure out what's going on. That could be visual noise, it could be auditory noise, it could be mechanical noise. It's a little more complicated concept. Another way to put it would just be the word ambiguity. So in general, humans hate ambiguity. It's super annoying to us, and our brains will pull all sorts of tricks to make what seems ambiguous into something that is binary and easily digestible or understandable. Now, this might seem to be getting a little off in the woods. Let me make it more concrete. In a game environment, an excellent player, an excellent team is able to parse the noise, the ambiguity of the data coming in, and say what's important and what's not, and how do we respond to it. So how does all this play out in the spatial constraints of a level? Well, by presenting the right ratio of noise to signal. If there's too much ambiguous data or noise, in the environment that you're playing in, a player can feel helpless or overwhelmed. But if too little is unknown, then the game can become static, overly simplistic, like a solved game like tic-tac-toe, where a smart person, they will always win. It's just a solved game. The level designer's responsibility is to present just enough ambiguity at a time that it can kind of pull the player through the experience, kind of one solved mystery at a time. For example, sight lines are the single biggest obvious example of this. So when you are behind a thing, you can't see around it. When you step around it, that mystery of what was behind it is now revealed. No single vantage point or sight line can reveal everything. It can't dispel all the ambiguity on the map. And there always needs to be some kind of risk-reward element to it. You're choosing actively, where am I standing, where am I looking, what am I behind? All of those things play into the player's overall strategy. In general, the more information that a sight line reveals, the higher the risk or opportunity cost needs to be. I'll show some examples of this when I show the map layout that I've created. partially obscured or occluded data creates some kind of mystery, right? What's behind that grate? Is that an enemy, friend, or foe? Most games you know that already, but which direction are they going? What is their loadout? These are all questions that will inform how you act. So that mystery creates an itch you want to scratch. You want to figure out what is the answer to that. Other examples are like footsteps or muzzle flashes around a corner. Again, mysteries, and depending on where you are, how much health you have, the overall strategy of the team, you may go towards a mystery or you may go away from it. So in this way, a level designer is putting weight on specific areas of the map, and it's this distribution of weights that creates a pleasing composition, a successful map or an unsuccessful one. As the player team resolves more and more ambiguity, it allows them to make better strategic decisions, which then filter down to the tactical and the hand-eye coordination level. This ambiguity resolution cycle, it's kind of the primary tool that a level designer uses to create a fun and flowing map. My job is to provide the optimal amount of ambiguity in the perfect places and ratio, and by removing obstacles to clarity for the core loop, the systems and mechanics. So here's how I do that in a first-person shooter, team versus team context. 1, landmarks. So landmarks should be the very first thing that you put in your sketch, in your level, as you're laying it out. The amount of ambiguity that you can clear up from your scene by having very clear landmarks means that you're not forcing the player to look towards a HUD, towards a map, that sort of thing. So when you're making a first-person shooter competitive type of game, you're not wanting the focus to be on the level. The mysteries and discoveries that happen in a PvP map should be about the opponents and discovering their strategies and tactics. 2, related to landmarks, but on a smaller scale, it's really important to have unique feeling areas that are inside of the player at all times. One thing that you'll find is that a big part of the strategy layer of a PvP or team versus team type of game is callouts. So a team leader or anyone can say, hey, I'm going to location A, or hey, the team is moving towards location B, I saw the enemy at location C, etc., right? And they'll always come up with names for these areas. So for example, if you have this hallway and there's a trash can there, and you notice that during playtesting, players are saying, hey, I'm going trash. That's kind of their lingo for I'm going down this alley that has a trash can. Now, what I find is you just lean into that. If they've called it that, hey, put a dumpster, put trash bags or whatever, just make it totally trash so that it's very obvious and you can see it from more locations. 3, map flow. So this is kind of a tricky subject in PvP because there's so many different kinds of levels that have different demands for the type of gameplay that's happening. But in general, if a player is camping in one spot for a long time, that generally means you need to improve the flow in that area. And you do that either by removing obstacles where they're hiding behind too many things, they're too safe in that area, or the advantages are too great versus the risk. So it's all about balancing that to keep players moving, because in a PvP context, you never want people to just feel comfortable in one spot. 4. That's how many 4 is. Number 4 on this list is reward players when they do clever things. The PvP maps that stand the test of time are ones where the players always are finding new vantage points, a way to bounce a grenade off a wall just right, or hide behind this slat in this fence and get this perfect shot. There's just always opportunities to learn more about a map, even though you've played it 1,000 times. And so that's something that you want to go in from the beginning when you're designing your maps, thinking about that. 5, you want to be able to accommodate all the classes and playstyles that are in the game that you're working on. And this can be tricky. A trap that can happen too easily is the map designer can play the archetype that they enjoy the most, or the style that they are naturally drawn to, and the map can kind of be skewed towards that play style. So that's where playing with lots of testing, lots of iteration, putting it in front of as many different people as possible is really important. And six, I'm gonna say it like a man. And 6, you wanna limit the ambiguous signals. Now, I just went on this whole rant about ambiguity and how important it is to think about it, the ratios of it at all time. And so this is something, again, where illustrates the difference between PvP and PvE. In PvE, when you're making the environment the star of the game, you want lots of interesting ambiguity, because pulling the player through it to answer the mysteries about the environment is the interesting thing. So to that end, you're going to have lots of things blowing in the breeze, and effects, and waterfalls, and butterflies, and all these things that are kind of moving, creating visual noise. They make environments really cool. But PvP is just not about that. You need to understand that when you put those elements in, you're distracting from what players are there for, which is figuring out their opponent's team, figuring out the opponent's strategy, their headspace, not about the environment. So it's not bad to have that kind of visual noise in a PvP map. You just need to understand that when you're there, it's eating into a budget of ambiguity. It's adding more ambiguity to your budget. And so account for that. This is something that was a lot easier back in the late 90s when I was working on Descent 3 and other first-person shooters, because you would have a couple hundred polygons for your environments max. And so there just wasn't much you could put in there to create a lot of extra extraneous ambiguity. Okay, and that is my list. That is my process, my design thinking. I'm gonna go into a lot more specifics in the following little clips, where I'm gonna show you the maps that I created and how I applied all of these things to it. But the final thing I wanna say before I get into that is to reemphasize again, it's all about communication. If these steps aren't happening in a studio culture of communication where everyone is open and clear, following these steps just isn't gonna work. You literally can't, because it's a team effort and everyone is pitching in. You gotta have everyone on the same page, understanding and passionate about what we're trying to accomplish together. And so building that kind of consensus as a level designer is very important, or at least understanding what the consensus of the team is and working with it instead of against it. So that is the theory behind how I make my design decisions for level designs. I hope you got something out of it, even if you're not a level designer, if you're just into art and design in general. I figure there's something in there for everyone. But now I'm going to demonstrate specifically how I applied all these steps and principles in these gray box maps. And again, for those of you who don't understand, the video game process, be warned, these are ugly, ugly maps. They are very much all about the design at this stage. I shouldn't say all, because we're still trying to create pleasing compositions, large scale compositions. But yeah, it's more about just how and where and when players experience things. So it's all very placeholder. And with that, let's dive into these maps. I wanted to make this video specifically to show how I approach level design for PvP first-person shooter. So I'm just going with a Counter-Strike bomb defusal style map. So let's just look at the overhead here. We've got a CT spawn over here, a terrorist spawn up there. We've got a bomb site A and a bomb site B that's kind of hidden under there. And so I'm just going to walk you through from a player's perspective how the sight lines work out and the different strategies that I think might be employed. But of course, as all level designers know, everything changes radically. This is a gray box first pass. Once teams get in there and actually start playing, everything changes. And to me, that's the delight of level design. I really enjoy that process. So anyway, this is from my first pass, idea of how it would be played, and then we see where it goes from there. So let's jump in there. So as a terrorist, you're starting in this little courtyard. presumably you've blown through the wall of this warehouse, and we're going to go talk about the A side of the map first. So once you exit your spawn location, the first thing you're presented with is these two landmarks. You've got this big radar dish over here and a communication antenna over there. The antenna is going to be spot A. So I'm going to go, let's start with long A. Shows off most of the area. So here you've got an approach that presents you with, to start out with, this corridor of area, and there are several places you could potentially be getting camped from. So there's plenty of corners here to peep, as if you need to, depending on if you and your team are rushing A or not. There's going to be different strategies, obviously, but let's just go over the main route to A first. So you go through this somewhat convoluted area. It's got some unique shape language to very much differentiate it from the rest of the map. This is the long route to A, and here is the bomb site for A. Now CT spawn is over there, so they will have probably taken up some sight lines somewhere around here. So I made sure to occlude you from most of that. Assuming you've got to this point, you're probably good until you pop out here, and then you're going to have to think hard about your future decisions from there. Let's go talk about A short. Okay, so this is where you would diverge, deciding whether to go short or long on A. If you're going to go short, you'll probably be taking a left through here. There's the spot. It's going to require either some jumping up walls or around these stairs straight to the A. Now you're going to have a lot of confidence that you've got some good backup to take that course, but that's generally the trade-off you take for a short route, right? Okay, let's talk about B. As a terrorist, if you're going B, you're going to take a left through this warehouse. I should note that the run as a terrorist is obviously, as in all CSGO maps, it's quite a bit longer. So CTs have a chance to scout and claim any territory they can. This B route is specifically long, but you'll see why here in a second. So there is B. This is B short, and you can just run straight to it down this big alley. And I'll go over all the counter strategies for CT in a minute. But specifically, one of the things that I did here is because if you're descending this ramp, anyone up or around there is going to see your feet, and they're going to see you coming a mile away. So these little peeps here give you an opportunity to see if you're being watched before you take that plunge down the ramp. Okay, so a B medium is going to be through this warehouse of fuel tanks. So if you're going tanks, you're probably not going to want to take a straight line like I just did there, because there could be someone camping up there. So you'll probably need to peep the area, and you can weave through these tanks to completely be occluded from anyone watching from up there. At that point, you have a chance to jump down to B and do your thing. So let's talk about B long. Okay, from this position, you can go B long, and this is going to pull you up. This is the kind of the most exposed, the natural trade-off being that you have great eyes on the area, but you're very exposed, but you also have a chance to scout and see if anyone's watching from up here. So this is a great sort of teamwork maneuvers to send one high, one low. But on the other hand, you're super exposed up here. It's going to take you a while to get there. If you are actually going for B, you'll probably want to drop down, something like that, to take it. Now let's go ahead and just talk about, after you've planted the bomb, how are you defending the site? So the sight lines that I put in place for B here, there's this one that's pretty sketchy, purposefully so. This is where you probably don't want to be, but if the other options are blocked off to you, this is an option. So here you're going to be able to see at the last minute if CT is running this direction. You'll get a better shot of them if they're coming on the higher ramp. But the obvious disadvantage is you're right here in this little nook, very easy to get at from a variety of angles. The better shot is up this ladder, and because Unreal does not have ladder climbing in its first-person shooter default, let's just pretend we climb that ladder through the magic of editing. Now, here is a fantastic spot to protect B. You've got pretty good view of most of the field, although you have no idea what's going on there, and that's pretty important because, well, we'll get into that with once we do counter-terrorist counter strategies. Another good spot is up here where you can see B, and if anyone's trying to defuse, you've got a prime opportunity to take them out. You can also see pretty well if someone's coming from either of those two directions. So this is a great spot and makes this warehouse tanks here kind of strategic to keep and to hold. Okay, let's talk counter-terrorist strategies. So we know they're either going for A or B. To watch for B, this is kind of the obvious eyes in the sky up here. It's fairly exposed. I've got one little bit of cover for you, but for the most part, if you're going to keep a good eye on the field, you're going to pay the penalty of being pretty exposed. One of the important notes here is that you cannot actually see B sight from up here. You're overhanged by too much, and you cannot see if anyone's coming out of tanks. So it's going to be pretty important to have someone up here, but they're going to, if it's only one person, you're going to have to commit. Are you watching B short and B long, or B mid? If you're B mid, you're going to be in here, but it's quite a commitment. But again, like I was just talking about, if anyone's protecting B, this is an important facility to control. Another option for CT protection of B is to take this helicopter here, and you can actually camp from inside the cockpit. If you're standing, your head can be seen, so you're vulnerable there. But if you're ducked down, you can't be seen, and you can camp B to your heart's content. You're just obviously very vulnerable. If anyone sees you from a variety of directions, you're pretty much toast. This is one of these kind of wacky ideas that generally doesn't make the final cut, right? It's pretty weird and fiddly, but I think it's important to experiment, especially in the gray box phase, with these kind of fun ideas, because sometimes you can salvage a core idea of it and find other ways to manifest that the experience of that initially that I'm going for there. So anyway, let's talk about A. So as counter-terrorist, defending A, the first spot I'm probably going to run, let me go back to CT spawn point. Okay, so from spawn, if you're going for A, you can take this bunker. Now this bunker provides you two different opportunities to peep A. You've got but both of them are pretty narrow, right? When you're in here, you're not seeing a large portion. Your sight lines are limited, and that is very much by design. If you want a less limited view, you're going to want to take the tower here. Now, this tower is purposefully a pretty convoluted route to get here. There's 3 different ways to get up here, but once you get it, you've got great overwatch of the entire A site and even a considerable part of B. So I feel like this is going to be a pretty tactical spot to want to take and maintain. Again, playtesting would reveal whether that's true or not. So to get into the tower there, one way to do it is through the control station here. Now what I have going on here is a light on the floor that's going to cast a player's shadow onto the ceiling. So while there's no direct sight lines from anywhere else on the field, if your shadow is being cast up there and someone knows about it, they can throw a grenade through the window. Again, this is one of those things that's going to emerge probably later game after you've got some econ going, but that's one way through here. The other way is through this fiddly area. And I don't mean fiddly in a derogatory sense. Sometimes you really want these kind of more just longer, more involved paths to get to areas. It makes them kind of more valuable, a little more special, and it just adds a little more to the experience. So the other way to get to tower is through this back alley here. After you go trash, you can run up this ramp here. And again, it's not as complicated or fiddly as the other two routes, but it is circuitous. So it's going to keep people who are in the crow's nest here, it's going to give them a lot more confidence that they're not going to be taken from behind. So they can really focus on A or the surrounding area. But anyway, not completely. The important thing is that there's always some amount of tension, right? You've got this high ground. It's paying off in some ways, but there's always a price to pay. So, okay, let's talk about terrorist rotating. So I think for CT, it's fairly obvious how rotates are going to work because they have such a more narrow bandwidth of the map to work with. For T, it's important to be able to rotate with a lot of cover. So that is explicitly why this whole back alley section exists back here. So you can do a pretty effective feint on B and then rotate to A, and vice versa. You can see the sight lines here. There are opportunities to be seen, but especially in the later game, once you've got some smokes and stuff like that, you can definitely do pretty effective rotates given that back alley area, but not impervious, right? Especially if CT owns this crow's nest tower here. Other than that, I think that's pretty much the broad gestures of the map. Again, I expect that as soon as the map is played, all of these things change radically, and to me that's really the fun and excitement of working on PvP levels. It's really exciting to see how people think in ways that are different than you expected, and then responding to that. You know, that this bunker, maybe it's never used and so I just block it off, or I find some way to make it useful, or you know, B is just impossible to keep, so I find ways to work around that. It's those kind of constantly changing logic puzzles that are really exciting about level design to me, especially in the Team VT context. So yeah, just wanted to give you guys a feel for how I think and approach design from a first-person shooter perspective. For me, it's all about resolving ambiguity. As a level designer, I'm presenting ambiguity and removing it in bite-sized chunks. That's what's fun. You're always resolving mystery. And now this map is more of a team versus environment style level, and the idea is you've got a team of specialties. So there's 3 different classes we've got. We're going to have a heavy, a scout, and a sniper. Here is where you're starting. Your team has paraglided through into this fortress here. The other thing to note is the theme for this is kind of an action horror genre style first-person shooter, and the goal is to take the tower. So we've got this underground base here, and it's got this evil tower where they're doing in this underground facility, they're doing genetic testing on scary monsters. So when you land here, there's this little helipad here. You can clearly see the location that you're trying to go to, again getting back to those landmarks, and you'll see that from time to time as a visual anchor, so you're never really lost. Okay, and the players can jump down here, and so I'm using light to lead the player from one location to the next. Now this courtyard area here has a couple features that may kind of bifurcate the player's attention, and this is an intentional thing. This is something that you do in horror from time to time, is you want to create a tension for the viewer or player. So over here, what I have right now, these spheres, you have to imagine that these are globs of gooey, scary monsters, and they're banging against those bars. Now around the time you come down here, it would be scripted so that an alarm starts going off. Something is going wrong in the lab. Who would have guessed? So when you come down here, you're going to see these things, alarms are going to go off, and they're going to be pounding against there. Now, you may think, oh, what's to stop them from getting at me? There's actually glass here. Now, if I were to spend a little more time, I would make this glass more opaque. Right now, you can see it's there. It can only be destroyed by the heavy. All right. He's got the grenades that can blow through that bulletproof glass. Now, if you do that, if you do blow up a wall, the monster that's in that cage is going to come charging at you, and you're going to have a monster fight on your hands, which you probably don't want. The idea is you're going to be coming by here, very nervous, looking at these things as you're passing. Oh man, what's going on? What's going on? Right around here, it would be scripted so that some scientists or guards or something would be running out here. Very Half-Life style, right? Monster comes up and eats them, and then you're going to have kind of a set-piece battle with a monster. And you're going to need to be really careful not to accidentally release these monsters while you're fighting the monster here. Okay, so once you're through that, that will lead you around here. And here's where things start to diverge for the different classes. This spooky hallway here is intended to, you can run straight down it, for one. I'm using some visual language, some lighting language. Whenever you see a purple light kind of off to the side, that's a clue that the scout can go do a thing there. So scouts can squeeze into smaller areas and do like hacking and stuff like that. But for now, let's go the main line route for the heavy and the sniper. So if they go down this hallway, you're fine. You know, these guys will be banging on the bars, snarling at you. If you get too close, they're gonna break through and attack. So you're gonna be walking this perilous line between these two edges. Hopefully building up some tension and fear. You don't want to release those guys. Now, this side hallway is very well lit to let you know this is the path forward. Okay, so this one is broken open. This is where the creature that you fought outside came from. So a little bit of environmental storytelling there to bring it together. So down this hallway, there will be some enemies. Right now I'm just kind of, as a placeholder, I'm using these turrets as enemies because I'm not going through the process of adding all the AI and that kind of stuff. If you go in these rooms, you kind of have access to the back of these cages. Down this one and this one. And so this is where I'm going to show you what the scout can be doing. Okay, so here's the alternate strategy. If you've got a scout in your group, which hopefully you will, rather than just blithely going down this hallway, the scout can find this little access area up here, get to the back of these cages, and again, these have glass on them so the monsters can't get you. But what the scout can do is come over here and release all the creatures at once. So the idea being that there will be enemies charging down this hall that are going to run out, pretend this is the enemy's view, and start shooting at you, the player, once you start going down this hallway, right? As the scout, what I can do is when the enemies start rushing by, I'll be able to see them running by there. I can flip this trigger, and now all that releases, just gonna blast through here so I can show you, that will release all the creatures into the hallway, and you end up with a scene kind of like this. Okay, and once that hallway is cleared, you're going to come into this area. Let's pretend that guy's not shooting at me. And now here we've got a giant escaped worm creature thing. So here's the enclosure that it broke out of. And there's, you know, there would be some little biome in here. But this is a giant double-headed worm. And the kind of unique mechanic with this guy is if you get close to it, he's going to lunge at you. You have to get within a certain distance of it, and it'll spit some like black goo at you. But if you get close enough and manage to dodge the goo, well, regardless whether you dodge it or not, it's going to come lurching towards you. So there's going to be a little cat and mouse action here where you've got to get close enough, back up, close enough, back up. And this is a mechanic that, were I doing a full-size level with this, there would be quite a few different variations on this. theme, but eventually what you're doing is you figure out you got to pull it back far enough so that you've exposed this door to progress further. Okay, and out here you come to this courtyard. Here you're going to see, again, the big tower landmark is reestablished. You know just where to go, or well, the general direction to go. And you now have an option to go left or right. Here's an area where, as a sniper, you could run out over here, and you've got a pretty good vantage point to help anyone going up the stairs. So if the heavy and the scout are going up the stairs, sniper can camp there and protect them from incoming troops that are going to be coming down the stairs. We've also got these little stop and pop locations in case they're needed, but you can imagine you're battling up the stairs. Turrety type stuff, trying to make sure that the sight lines are such that you can get good shots off, but you're not going to be safe just camping forever. There's these doors, which are essentially monster closets. The idea there being that any amount of enemies can be spawned from there as needed, wherever those doors are. There's another one of those there, another pair there. So yeah, as you start approaching the tower, you're going to be attacked from multiple angles. And again, this is where if your sniper is down there, they can be helping you out. And as you get close to the tower, there's going to be enemy snipers, which you can kind of see up there, that will be taking pot shots at you as you're approaching. So I wanted to make sure there was a sight line where you're relatively safe. You can squeeze in here. The sniper can get some good shots back at them as needed. But there's no perfect spot to defend against those guys. Behind this box is okay if you're ducking down, but again, it's not. You can be attacked and flanked if you're spending too much time doing that. Trying to keep the pressure at a a good level throughout most of the map here. Okay, so you're going to be running, dodging back and forth from these snipers, and then here's a safe point where you're somewhat protected from them. They have very bouncy bullets right now. You got to just pretend these are sniper bullets for now. Enemies can come from behind you, of course, so that would be bad. And now let's. You've got these flanking turrets here. So running straight at here while dealing with those guys and these guys, that's suicide. You don't want to do that. Hopefully what would emerge is the sniper would be trying to take out these turrets while the heavy is providing some kind of protection. Now as the heavy, you can go up here and just blow through this door. But again, dangerous because of these guys if these haven't been taken care of. An alternate is if you are preserving your grenades or whatever, your scout can go up here and hack this. Again, you're going to have to be careful of all these other elements going on. Additionally, your scout, if they're clever, they can see this little purple light down here, and probably they will have noticed somewhere around here there's this whole lit up purple path underneath the bridge there. So your scout can sneak down here. And these lights here correspond with the flanking turrets that you can see up there. So the scout can hack into these turrets, beep boop, turn them off. That's your alternate strategy there. Additionally, your scout can come in here, and I'm going to come right back to what the scout's doing here when I talk about the boss arena. So back up top, the heavy and the sniper are in the boss room. Now imagine along with me that there is some kind of scary, fast-moving boss that you can kind of pin down to a location if you shoot them on their weak spot. So you're trying to dance around them in here, and there are several ways that you could injure this boss. So essentially, you're trying to stun them, put them in a place where you can apply environmental damage, such as luring the worm, which we've established how the worm mechanic works. So if you pin the boss down right here, lure the worm onto it, then the worm is going to apply damage to the boss. The boss will then take damage, get unstunned, and attack you again. Another option is to try to get him pinned down under one of these vents, at which point this monster will drop down on him, and then you have that kind of monster attack going on. Monster action. And then the third way is with your scout down underneath, the heavy can blow up this glass, and then you can try to get the boss stunned on top of here. He's got a weak spot underneath. The scout can shoot up into him at that point. So while the heavy and the sniper are up there in the fracas, the scout can be down here taking pot shots from beneath, assuming that the heavy has blown open the glass, the protective glass here, because the scout's bullets aren't strong enough to penetrate it. But if the boss is lured over this grate, then this is a perfect opportunity for the scout to attack from beneath. And there's 3 access points for doing so. That's essentially the flow of the map. Once you defeat the boss, yay, you did it, go team. And that's the idea. So let's go back to the studio and talk about, we'll wrap this up and talk about the prize winners from last month's video. So yeah, there you have it. More stuff than you ever needed to know about level design. Unless you're a level designer, in which case you probably already knew that stuff anyway. Why did I do it? Well, I mean, it's something I really enjoy. So I hope you enjoyed seeing my enjoyment of level design. Now, let's see, prizes. So this was what happened on the last live stream. A very exciting spinny wheel. And so we gave away 2 of these prize packages of this bookmark, the sculpture that I made, a pin, a sticker. It's so many things. Yeah, so we gave away one of these prize packages to people who commented on the last video, and the prize winner was. And now, drum roll, please. Click. Here we go. Big prize giveaway, sculpture and a pin and a book goes to Mr. Rat. Mr. Rat, congratulations to you, Mr. Rat. You are now promoted to Mr. King of Rats because you've got all this cool stuff on the way to you as soon as you reply to my message, so I know where to mail the stuff. Great, yeah, so Mr. Rat, I'm glad this went to him because he's been super great. He always comments on every video that I have. He usually just comments with the word algorithm because he recognizes that a video that has a comment on it gets, bumped up in the YouTube algorithm. But hey, I appreciate all the support I can get. I'm really happy it's going out to you, so congratulations. And then the second prize package is going to someone who supports me financially, so that's through Patreon or subscriptions on Twitch. And the winner of this one is... and a book, and a sticker, and a thing. And it goes to... what? Wow. Okay. Congratulations, Damon. Damon Rath. Congratulations. I'm also very excited that this is going out to Damon. He's been a longtime supporter going back like well over a year, and huge supporter on Patreon, one of the big ones. So his name was on the list a couple of times. The more you Patreon me, the more times your name goes on the list. There's a whole like algebraic math equation. No, just kidding. It was like $3 and $5, their name went on once. $10, your name goes on twice, and $20, it goes on 3 times. So it's not that complicated. Anyway, yeah, congratulations. I'm really happy that my friend Damon gets this prize package. Delightful. He already has a signed Nintendo Power little article from Nintendo Power magazine where I was in when I was like 15 or something. Anyway, yeah, so he's just full of Josh Foreman memorabilia. His house is probably just a shrine to me, I assume. And so should yours be, really. I mean, everyone... am I doing a good, like, Jimquisition thing here? Pretty good. Thank God for me. Anyway, yeah, thanks for joining me, guys. Thank you to all my other Patreons, which you're going to see here in a second. You, too, can be a Patreon and win fabulous prize packages when I get around to making them, which should be soon because, book 2, it's just around the corner, you guys. The journey continues. It's going to be very exciting. I'm very excited to bring it to you guys. And we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.